Most international disputes are highly complex, and attempting to solve them by military means often has unintended consequences. We can show some examples of this if we go back 35 years to Afghanistan and Iran. 35 years ago in Afghanistan, the Russians invaded, put up a puppet regime. The Americans then, wanting to counter this, supported the Mujahideen as a guerrilla force to push the Russians out of Afghanistan. This they succeeded in doing. The Russians took so many casualties they were forced to leave. They left behind a puppet regime with Russian training and modern Russian equipment, but that still soon fell, which may have parallels with modern events. Also at the same time, in Iran, there was the dictator in the Shah of Iran. He was supplied with American equipment in exchange for oil, and he was overthrown 35 years ago by an Islamic regime. The Islamic regime wasn't at that moment in time totally hostile to the West, but America and others were worried about where it might go. In order to counter that, they encouraged Iraq to go to war with Iran. Iraq built up a very large army, and there was a war between Iraq and Iran. It cost over 1 million casualties and nearly bankrupted Iraq. At the end of the war, Iraq had a very large army and no money. To the south of Iraq there was Kuwait, which had lots of money and no army to speak of. So Iraq then invaded Kuwait to take over its oil revenues. The West was then very worried about this, because once it had taken Kuwait, the next step beyond was to go into Saudi Arabia. The Western forces decided to send forces to protect Saudi Arabia from invasion from Iraq, and also to liberate Kuwait. However, in doing so they actually stationed troops in a number of the holy cities in Saudi Arabia, including Mecca, which upset some fundamentalists, including one in particular who was of Saudi birth, who was fighting the Russians in Afghanistan, and he decided then to launch the September 11th attacks on America. As a result of this, America then decided, with some Western allies, to launch invasions of Afghanistan and also, later on, Iraq. They set up regimes in both Iraq and Afghanistan after having successfully overthrown what was there. But, of course, they also took casualties themselves, eventually had to pull out, left behind what might be described as puppet, corrupt regimes in both countries, which look like they may be falling apart. And now, in Iraq, we might even be using or allying with the Iranians in order to try and prop up the regime in Iraq. So we've come full circle. Now, all of this was highly expensive, both in money but also in lives. Maybe, rather than going for a solution based on bombs and bullets, could go for a more peaceful solution based on lines of education and learning. May not work, but it's worth a try. It's likely to end up being less expensive in lives and money than war and bombs. Can we try and educate our way to a peaceful solution?